The Attorney General, Mrs. Marlene Malahoo Fort, is also here with us this afternoon. Now, in this usual setting, it is my almost obligation to remind you, if you haven't done so yet, to sanitize. The sanitization center is just outside. We do have sanitizers and what have you. And since we can't do a seat apart, you want to make sure that you have a little arm room between you and your colleague right beside you. No hugging and touching unnecessarily, And gift exchanges are fine. So we have the PS of the Ministry of Health, Mr. Brian, who is here. And so you have your final chance to do your countdown to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand. The Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, is with us for our briefing. You may be seated. And so without further ado, let's head straight over to Prime Minister Holness, who is just coming out of a meeting of Cabinet. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Naomi. Good evening, everyone. And again, I have to thank the press for facilitating us at such short notice. But the press has been very faithful. And I believe we are doing a little better ourselves, Chris. And that we were hoping that we would start at 5:15, but as usual, the process of decision making is not a simple one, and we try to deliberate on the issues and ensure that we consider all the complications and all the permutations and combinations of outcomes. And I believe that we have managed to satisfactorily discuss the issues, and we are now at a point where we can announce some decisions. We are at the point in the epidemic where we are classified as having local transmission. That means that we have imported cases, and then persons locally have been infected, traced to those imported cases. In fact, we now have 19 cases, and I believe 5 are local transmission. In other words, those 5 locally infected persons were infected by someone who traveled from a foreign country into Jamaica. The next stage would be for us to have what is called community spread, where persons are being infected, but you cannot trace them back to an imported case. So far, the Ministry of Health and our experts, and I must here make a special commendation of our public health officers. They have done an excellent job, in my opinion, in doing the contact tracing, that they have been able to identify the cases, and they have been on target in almost all of them. Now, bear in mind, Jamaica should bear in mind that this is not an exact science. There is a pretty large margin of error. But we have been following the recommended playbook in how we conduct our contact tracing, and I believe we have done that very well. And it is of note that our Minister of Health has been commended, and the Ministry of Health has been commended in how we have conducted our outreach. Well, you know, any commendation I get goes to the team. goes to the team. So we are cognizant that as the epidemic progresses through its natural phases, that it is not a matter that if we will reach community spread, it is just a matter of when. It is a part of the epidemic. So there are some measures that we have to take to ensure, on the same principle of flattening the curve, that we prevent any wide-scale outbreak or spread. And as far as possible, we're going to try to do that. So the cabinet today received community, what's it called now, Chris? Social distancing. Social distance. It's good that we can laugh even in this time of crisis. The cabinet has today received an update on the development surrounding the anti-COVID-19 efforts arising from the report and deliberations of the cabinet. The decision has been taken that one, with effect from 11:59 p.m. on Saturday, March 21, 2020, and for a period of 14 days in the first instance, Jamaica's air and seaports will be closed to incoming passenger traffic, outgoing passenger and cargo. Outgoing passenger and cargo will be allowed. The cabinet also agreed to the following. A, that there will now be increased emphasis in relation to the elderly and persons at risk by virtue of pre-existing medical conditions. So you're going to be hearing much more from the government and a much more targeted focus on ensuring that the public is aware and that the government's response addresses the elderly and those persons with pre-existing conditions. I mean, we have been always sending out information, but the Minister of Health and his team, the Permanent Secretary and the CMO will be speaking much more now about our elderly, because they are indeed, once you have community spread and even local spread, they now become the really at-risk community. We have discussed and agreed that we will be utilizing our final year medical students. We had discussed final year medical students in relation to supporting clinical and surveillance activities of the Ministry of Health. We need all the help we can get so that we are able to cover as much ground as possible in ensuring that we can actually contain the spread for as long as possible. And we also agreed to the establishment of a quarantine center at the University of the West Indies. I'll now ask Minister Tufton to give a further update.
Thank you very much, Honorable Prime Minister, colleagues of the Cabinet, ladies and gentlemen. So as was said earlier, we now have 19 confirmed cases of COVID-19, with 3 positives being confirmed last evening. These persons are a 38-year-old male, a U.S. citizen with a history of travel from Boston. He arrived in the island on March 14, 2020. A 30-year-old female with a history of travel from New York, arriving on the island on March 17, 2020. And a 60-year-old female retiree resident of Portland. And this case remains under investigation in terms of the connection with someone who came into the island with the virus. Prior to these 3, the Prime Minister would have announced a 16th case during Parliament, who was a 57-year-old male with a history of travel from Long Island, New York, who arrived in Jamaica on March 10th. To date, we have tested some 89 cases at the National Influenza Center, based on the clinical the symptoms. 19 would have tested positive, 70 tested negative, which approximate to about 20% or just under 20%. We are waiting results for an additional 10 cases. Additionally of note, 479 persons have come into the island from a country of interest since January 31st. 25 persons are in quarantine in a government facility. 110 are in home quarantine. And note that these home quarantine numbers do not include the residents of 7 and 8 Miles, Bull Bay, and more recently, the Cornpea settlement in Southeast Clarendon. 46 persons are in isolation in government facilities, and isolation, of course, means a more elevated form of monitoring, which will eventually lead to testing. We have 2 communities, as was said earlier, under quarantine, 7 and 8 Miles, Bull Bay, and Cornpea settlement, Hayes, Clarendon. Cornpea, like 7 and 8 Miles, Bull Bay, in St. Andrew before, will be under quarantine for the next 14 days, and the Prime Minister spoke to that in Parliament. During that time, the public health investigators will be completed even as residents are monitored closely for any signs of COVID-19. Early detection of symptoms will allow for early isolation and prevention of the transmission of the virus. And so we ask the members of that community, if you are feeling ill, if you have symptoms, please report it to the medical personnel on the ground so we can take the appropriate action as quickly as possible in your interest and in the interest of the community. Again, as announced by the Honorable Prime Minister, the boundary for the quarantine runs from its starting point along the private railroad track that is located to the east of the community, then heads in a southerly direction for approximately 230 meters. It continues in a southwesterly direction to a point just south of the Cornpea settlement community along the Gullyway, and then in a northerly direction along another Gullyway for a distance of approximately 530 meters to a point west of the three-way junction leading into the Cornpea community. And the constabulary, the JDF, are already positioned at the entrance of the community from different points, and the medical team members are on the ground. Our enhanced medical surveillance continues in Bull Bay, and we have been doing a number of things, as we are now doing in Cornpea. Mapping by senior public health inspectors are on the ground, interviewing of each head of household with screening questions and the temperature of persons taken. If a positive sign of fever or any symptom is detected, the necessary actions are taken. Arrangements have been put in place for the medical officer to be on call for medical direction in the community. In terms of pharmacy services, the National Health Fund Drug Serve Mobile Unit has been assigned to provide pharmacy services for those in those communities who require it. And in terms of social services, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security is distributing care packages for families. Specifically to Bull Bay, between Sunday, March 15th to Thursday, March 19th, 119 householders have been visited, 1,522 persons have been interviewed and assessed, 1 person had a history of fever and was isolated as of Sunday, and over 600 sets of educational material has been distributed. So the work continues and will continue in that community. The Ministry of Health and Wellness wishes to urgently make contact with all passengers who traveled on the following flights. And we have a 888 One Love number that you can call. We have a call center taking these calls. And these flights are flights that had persons who eventually tested positive. So there's a JetBlue flight 659, which arrived at the Norman Manley International Airport on Tuesday, March 17th at 1 a.m. JetBlue flight 2959, which arrived at the Norman Manley International Airport on Thursday, March 12th at midnight, and the JetBlue flight B2893, which arrived at the Donald Sangster International Airport at 2:14 p.m. on March 14th, all of course 2020. I reiterate again the numbers: 888-1-LOVE, that's 888-663-5683. We also have 888-754-7792, 542-5998, 542-6007, and 542-6006. We also have two emails: covid19@moh.gov.jm and Jamaica or JA COVID-19 fax@gmail.com.
Thank you for that update. We could take questions at this time, or we could continue to give updates. All right, well, we'll continue with updates. So we have taken some other decisions as this epidemic progresses. One is to have a structured management of gifts, donations, and international cooperation. So I've asked the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade to take charge of that area and to coordinate it. I'll now ask the Minister to just give a brief as to what our international cooperation and partnerships look like.
Thank you, Prime Minister. It is important for us to start by saying that this is one of the key roles of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, which is the facilitating relations between Jamaica and our international partners, bilateral and multilateral. There are several opportunities which are now presenting themselves to us and which we have been working with the Ministry of Health. But at these times, the enthusiasm and passion that often comes to the fore when people want to help Jamaica can cause us to create gaps. And what we're trying to do is ensure that we match needs and ability and willingness to supply effectively. And that simply means structuring more consistently not only our requests, but the offers that come in, as at these times people tend to speak to the person or the organization with which they have the closest relationship, and sometimes in an attempt to speed up their communication, and that sometimes creates gaps. So we're trying to ensure, and the Prime Minister has mandated, that there now be consistent flow directly through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which will just make the cooperation with which we are used to dealing even that more effective. So thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Minister. I'll now ask the Minister of Education to give an update on the progress that is being made with our remote education strategy.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. First of all, let me just say right off the bat that the strategy of ensuring that children do not lose access to their lessons during this period, we engaged a process of communication through the internet, through the local cable channels, and we have had great assistance from our established communication houses like TVJ and CVM, and all those who have really come in and done a fantastic job ensuring that we get out there. 25 community channels have also been brought into play, and the children now have gotten so accustomed to that kind of interaction with their teachers and with the educational system that it's going to be challenging when we have to return to the classroom, because they're doing very, very well. We have a 70% coverage across the island, and the other 30% where we don't have access to cable and to internet services, we do it physically, manually, and the lessons are collected and are given to the students and then collected after they are through. and it's being done by a fantastic team of workers in the Educational Ministry. I'm extraordinarily proud of them, led by the Permanent Secretary, Dr. McLean, and her CEO, Kassan Troop, Dr. Kassan Troop. And most importantly, we have diversified the structure of management in the ministry to more involve the 6 regional directors who are responsible for certain geographical areas throughout the country. And we are in touch with each other several times for the week via video conferencing, where we share ideas and strategies as recently as today. It is fair to say that the children are not being disadvantaged in any way, and in fact are doing extremely well. And although we have been faced with some challenges with respect to communications and so forth, we are very confident that next week is going to be even better. But I can assure you all that as far as we are concerned, this action by us has been a resounding success to date. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Minister Samuda. The business of the country still goes on, including the business of justice. And so the courts have made some adjustments to their schedule. Minister Delroy Chuck will give us an update.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. The Chief Justice, after discussion with the Minister of Health and an advisory committee that he set up, known as COVID-19 Advisory Committee, consisting of senior judges, DPP, members of the bar, etc., have decided to scale down the operation of the courts from Monday, the 23rd, until April the 20th. This means that all trials in that period will be postponed and new dates will be put on the website or can be obtained by calling certain numbers. The numbers I will try to provide or will be on a press release from the courts. This doesn't mean that the courts have been closed down. The courts will still continue to operate, especially for emergency matters, matters of great importance such as domestic violence, maintenance payments, matters affecting children, matters coming under the Quarantine Act. And for those persons who want to plead guilty, that will also be available, and also for guilty pleas in the traffic courts. More importantly, persons who are on bail, the bail will be stayed until the next court day, and the next court day you are to check with the website or the courthouse to see when is the next court day. So this is an important part that the Chief Justice and the courts have agreed to, which would be consistent with what has been the measures that have been put forward by this government.
Thank you, Minister Chuck. I'm going to ask Minister Tufton to just say a few more words on the major announcement made, which is the closure of our airports to incoming passengers. Minister Tufton will be hosting what's it called, Chris? An internet town hall? Digital. A digital town hall. I should know. Yes. The digital town hall.
Prime Minister, I'm just echoing the concerns you raised at the level of cabinet with our colleagues as it relates to the diaspora. Because the immediate question that is likely to be asked of our diaspora community, very large and very linked into Jamaica, is how do the restrictions at air and seaports for passengers affect them and their ability to travel and to come into Jamaica. And the clinical advice which we are advancing to our diaspora family members is that based on all the examinations and assessment of the virus and its spread from person to person, it is fundamental that we pause for a period in terms of our movement as part of protecting ourselves, our family members, and by extension our community, whether where you are in the diaspora or your family members here in Jamaica. And the evidence here is very supportive of that. The 10 of the 19 cases, most are imported, and persons locally who have gotten the virus clearly got it from family members who have come in, or friends. All the countries of the world are imposing restrictions, And our attempt at trying to manage the potential crisis that we face has to include reduction in the movement of persons. In that regard, we have planned a digital town hall meeting, which will feature myself and the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, a clinician, and our ambassador to the US, and I think maybe one or two others. Will be on this evening at 6 p.m., which is almost like right now. And it will be live, and we will allow an opportunity to have the diaspora members send us their questions, their queries, and hopefully they'll tune in and get some of the concerns answered as it relates to the restrictions on travel. It's powered by Flow, and it's on Facebook, Twitter, and all the other social media platforms. So I invite, so it's at Flow Jamaica, at COVID-19 Digital Town Hall, at the mohwgov.jm, or at Christopherton. Flow 1, right? So I'm inviting the diaspora members to the extent that they're listening on the internet to tune into that shortly, and we can further have a discussion on that issue.
All right, I'm going to invite Minister Vance to give an update on a private sector initiative that he has been coordinating.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, colleagues, members of the media. You'd have recalled last week, you'd have seen Minister Tufton cutting a ribbon and handing over 5 buses procured by government for use in the health services specific to transportation of public health workers. Well, based on the fact that 5 buses would not be able to manage for the 4 regions, I was reached out to by the Northeastern Regional Health Authority, which covers Portland, St. Ann, and St. Mary, because of the difficulties that were being experienced by public health officials getting to work and getting from work. And for those of you who know Portland, just imagine trying to get a taxi out of the Rio Grande Valley to get to the Port Antonio Hospital. So the issues were that they were not able to get transport on a reliable basis, and then of course the commingling is just not the best scenario for public health workers and of course the general public in general. So through a private sector initiative that I reached out to, I was able to get 2 15-seater buses and hand them over to Portland today as loaner buses for the duration of the COVID crisis. So it could be 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is. And in doing that today, I realized that it would only take 3 or 4 more buses to deal with the Northeast Regional Health Authority issues, which is St. Mary and St. Ann. So I'm pleased to announce that in collaboration with Minister Tufton and through his ministry, we will get those buses for Monday. But then that leaves 3 regions. So as putting on my private sector hat, I realized that with the downturn in the economy, it simply means that most of the tourism-related enterprises, tour companies, rent-a-car companies, and even businesses that have downsized and downscaled because of the crisis have these assets that are not earning for them, either are they being utilized. So it is quite simply and easy to say that we are confident that within another week or 2, after meeting with Minister Tufton and his team on Monday to come up with a proper structure in terms of how we'll handle this, is to make sure that we can get all public health workers that are currently working in the 4 health regions to be able to be transported to and from work privately, so that they know a time to be picked up and they know a time to be dropped off. And I think that will take a lot of stress off of them. And as you know, they are already under severe stress. And I think it will be a good initiative that we can work on in the short term. And then, of course, Prime Minister, in doing that and getting them accustomed to being picked up and dropped off, which they should be. We'll have to look further in terms of how we can concretize this for a continuation after COVID, where public health workers will finally be transported. So we look forward to working, and hopefully the nurses and all the doctors and whoever else will be happier next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Vaz. Just by way of update, last week this time, questions were asked about water and whether or not the country was in a state of readiness, and we were very frank to say that the challenges exist and we are trying as best as possible. The situation in Manchester, Mandeville specifically, was raised where a major well, the pepper well, the pump for the pepper well had broken down, and we did say that by this week we should have had the parts, so we did get the parts. The pump is now up and running. I'm not certain whether or not all the areas have been now supplied with water. There are other wells and pumps to be restored. That is now being done, but residents in Mandeville who were deprived of that precious commodity can now have hope that they will be getting water. If they have not already started to get water, in the very, very near future, they should have water in their pipes. I am open to questions, but before that, the Minister of Transport and Mining will just give you, you want me to give the quick update? There have been many questions asked about the operations of our airport, as to whether or not we have equipment for taking temperatures and the level of security that is at the airport, particularly with incidents that have happened. Just again, by way of update, in both international airports, Norman Manley and Sangster International Airport, we have some very sophisticated temperature equipment, scanners. You don't see them. No, not the handheld ones. You may not readily recognize them, but they are strategically positioned and they do thermal imaging. They capture you as you walk through and they raise alarm internally for the agents who are at the airport to pull you out of the crowd or stop you if such alarm is raised. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. We do have a few questions from social media, but given that the media is also here, we'll allow them to ask a few first, and we'll go to social media as well.
Bear in mind that Minister Tufton and Minister Johnson-Smith, they have their digital town hall.
Indeed, sir. All right, let's acknowledge Mr. Log. Go ahead. Could you, just usual, identify yourself and quickly ask your question?
Anthony Log, TVJ. Many Jamaicans may be wondering what took us so long to make this decision. How do you respond to that, Prime Minister?
Well, you know, I'm happier that Jamaicans are of that view than the other view, because the struggle we had was that we know that once we have made this decision, there are many Jamaicans, and you know, there's a sense that we're separating, and that's in a crisis. You want everybody to hang together, and so we have deliberated very carefully. It was always on the books that the airport would have to be closed. It would happen, and Jamaica is not the only one doing it. But we were giving hints and subtle markers, because what you don't want is to have a panic and everybody rushes in. That way you definitely could not control all the people coming in. But people would have interpreted, would have seen the messages that we have put on 14 days quarantine, and so there are persons who would have come in. We are giving notice still. You have 24 hours basically to complete flights that are programmed. But the concern that is being expressed locally is one that we have to pay close attention to. Because as the numbers grow, they are going to grow from imported cases. And so therefore we really have to now control that, because we are now moving into a phase where you have local spread. Now, you don't want to have imported cases, local spread, and then community spread happening at the same time. That would totally stretch our resources. So right now, our public health officials are engaged in doing contact tracing, matching the origin to the cases identified. Now, when you have community spread, it is a whole different ballgame. And so now is the time that we have to make that decision, and the decision has been made. I know it is going to cause great dislocation. We understand that, but everybody has to also understand this is an emergency. And it is not, as we say in Jamaica, a joke thing. Because some people are treating it as if it is a joke thing. Some people are being weak fence. Right now we need strong fences to keep the virus contained.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Clark?
Hello, good evening, Nationwide News, Brittany Clark. All right, so I have a few questions. I'm going to ask Minister Tufton and Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith. All right, so firstly, based on your contact tracing and other information gathered by the medical team, what do you think or what do you believe COVID-19 in Jamaica will look like within the next 2 weeks?
That's why we have daily press conferences.
All right, thank you. And Minister Johnson-Smith, has any other person at the New York Consular Office tested positive for COVID-19?
We haven't received the results. 4 persons have been tested, but they've been given 72 hours, and we understand that it may even take a little longer. So they've not had their results back yet, but 4 persons have been tested.
Thank you, Minister. Just a few from social media as well, Prime Minister. There's a question from a member in the diaspora asking, does the closure include persons coming in from the diaspora?
Yes. Let me read it let me read it again. With effect from 11:59 p.m. on Saturday, that is Saturday coming, March 21, 2020, and for a period of 14 days, that is for the next 14 days from the 21st, Jamaica's air and seaports will be closed to incoming passenger traffic. I think that's very clear. Outgoing passenger and cargo will be allowed. So cargo coming in, cargo going out will be allowed. Outgoing passenger definitely will be allowed.
Sir, another one from social media.
So I think
Yes.
Minister Grange, who has been getting many calls from the entertainment community, from students who are there, the term that is used is shelter in place. Stay put, stay where you are. I know it's difficult. Some people may not be able to find food and shelter, and because some of them are in schools and the schools are closed and they are being sent home. We know. In as much as we can help, that is the next phase. We will have to work out how that is done. It's a difficult time. Our prayers are with you, and we will try to see what else we can offer as assistance.
Sir, as a means just to notify everyone, we'll just take a few more and then we wrap. It's a very concerned parent on social media asking, really, you spoke to those in the older age bracket. What would you say to our children who are worried at this time as well?
So let me start with the older age bracket. We have not yet really spoken to them, and we have officials here from the Ministry of Health who could reinforce the risk and the threat. I think we have to be careful with our language, which could give the impression that our young children and young adults and teenagers are not at risk. The truth is that it is a new virus and we are still learning about it. And so the cautious thing to do is to take the threat very seriously for all. I would say to our students, our young people listening, that practicing the recommended personal hygiene regimen is a good place to start to ensure your own health and security and safety. So that's number one. Wash your hands regularly. Be careful how you touch surfaces. And if you touch surfaces, wash your hands in your home, in your places of play, be careful. Sanitize where you can. If you have to cough and sneeze, we recommend that you use a tissue to cough or sneeze in. If you don't have that in place, the next best is to sneeze in the bend of your elbow. Hard for children, hard for young people to maintain social distance. This is now a new term in our vocabulary. We have to practice it on a regular basis. I would also say to our young people, this is not the end of times. It is not the end of the world. Pandemics, epidemics happen, and the truth is that as we become a more global space where everybody's flying to see grandma and coming back to meet a friend and moving all over, we literally make the world our community. And therefore, the spread of these kinds of infectious diseases will probably become a more frequent feature in our future. It is not the end of the world, however. Science and technology is advancing rapidly. And therefore, I am confident that they will find either a vaccine or a treatment management regime to be able to give confidence to people that they can control this disease. But that does not relieve us of our personal, social responsibility. And these things are simple things to do, but we must have the discipline. The last thing I would say to our young people is you're going to be bombarded with information. The new term that has been coined is, along with epidemic and pandemic, you now have an infodemic, a deluge of information that are not always true. So it is important that you are able, in using social media, in watching your television, in listening to your friends talk, you must be able to identify a source that is trusted and factual. The government of Jamaica is spending a lot of time and effort in keeping regular communications with the people of Jamaica, giving regular updates so that there is a source of trusted, factual information that you can follow.
All right, sir, we have two more. Mr. Henry had one, and I know Kalisha had one, so let's just take those two, and then we can wrap up. It's 12 minutes past 6 o'clock, so we'd like to do that by 6:15. Mr. Henry, real quickly.
Hello, yes, Balford Henry from the Observers. I'm just wondering if, before Dr. Tufton leaves, if he could give us an update as to what is really happening at the family home of this gentleman who died in Clarendon, because there seems to be some family rifts. Some people are saying that he didn't die from the virus and all of that. And
so let me just, without going into too much detail, because I don't think it's appropriate for us to be discussing personal family issues, but there have been some issues as it relates to the members of the family, even prior to the death of the individual, the passing of the individual in question. Since that time, yes, one family member has indicated that the individual who passed died from pneumonia. Now, very clearly, COVID-19 is the primary cause of death with COVID-19 is pneumonia, right? So it's fine to say he died from pneumonia. The reality is that because of the upper respiratory ailment, the capacity to breathe, the congestion of the lungs, I mean, I'm not a medical doctor, so forgive me if I don't explain it clinically. But the reality, it's fine to die from pneumonia and be positive for COVID-19. Not fine to die. Okay. One with COVID-19 is likely to be affected in a severe way with upper respiratory ailment. And pneumonia is a consequence of that. And the older you are, the more vulnerable you are. And in this case, he is correct. What he's not correct in saying is that it is not COVID-19. Okay?
So,
what? Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm asking you for all the family members.
Well, let me tell you, one of the challenge we have, sir, is that it highlights the issue of stigma and discrimination. And this is why, as part of the process going forward, the communications team have been mandated to begin a process of greater public sensitization around this challenge, this disease. Because what we have found in the field is that the discussion around COVID-19, both in the international media as well as in Jamaica, has gotten to a point where persons are afraid to admit that they are at risk. And worse, if they have it, they don't want anybody to know, which probably is one of the most risky postures to take, because if you start doing that, you're going to have a lot of issues as it relates to treatment, and you're going to now run the risk of spreading, or you're going to hiding and end up not getting the type of attention that you require. So in many cases, what we find is that people are now not wanting to share because of the stigma. We want to reassure the public that it's okay if you have it. We don't want you to get it. And there is a process to dealing with it. And frankly speaking, you can recover from it. And we're going to have to try and get more general acceptance around that.
Thank you, Minister. We'll give the final question here to Kalisha. And Prime Minister, I have a deluge of questions from social media. I just want to do 2 of them because workers and students have a lot to ask. Well, Kalisha, go ahead.
Kalisha Williams, Television Jamaica. You mentioned that 5 of the 19 cases are local spread, but in the event, for instance, of community spread, are there any plans in the foreseeable future for a nationwide curfew? There have been some talk recently about imposing a curfew.
All right, so we have, I think, very strategically deployed all the tools in the toolbox to handle an epidemic as they are needed. And those that are preemptive, we have also put them in. Right now, the phase in which we are in, it's containing. And we are putting in the measures to contain because we are able to identify the clusters. And that is coming from our contact tracing. So we identify that there is one case in a particular area. We see the people who have come into contact. They form a cluster, we can control that cluster. If it goes beyond that, then there are other measures that we will have to take. My job is not to scare the nation. My job is not to see the premature shutdown of the economy. So in managing the health issues, we are also managing the economic issues because both are related. You wouldn't want to put people under quarantine or shut down, and then, you know, the production stops, people can't get food, and then you have another form of crisis on your hand. You will have seen a video circulating of even in this very small instance of a quarantine, you know, people are raising issues because not everyone is going to view the measures as being necessary and reasonable. There are always persons who have differing opinions. You know, just today, I got a call from someone in a banking institution where someone came in, apparently from a Jamaican coming back from overseas. They were asked to sanitize their hands, and they objected. That's just how it is. There are people who are going to take a different view, believing that we are overreacting, not understanding. Not everyone has yet got the message of the seriousness. So we're doing it in a way that we're trying to bring everybody along with us. We're hoping that we don't have to use enforcement measures, but it is becoming clearer and clearer to me every day that we will have to use enforcement measures because there are persons whose behavior is putting the nation's good at risk. And that is crystal clear to me. So I've asked the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice to look at the various fines applicable to breaches of the laws that we are now implementing for the securing of public health. Some of those fines are outdated. So on Tuesday, we hope to come to Parliament with adjusted fines and penalties and have them put in place because we are not going to allow any one individual to put the nation's health at risk.
Thank you, sir. Just a few from social media and as students especially wanting to find out if there will be an extension of the stay-at-home that was announced last week.
Yes, as I had promised, that we will give an update 5 days from the date of promulgation. So I believe that 5-day would be on Monday.
Would it be
So Monday after cabinet, we will update the nation.
And is that the same for workers and a lot of them?
So for everybody, if it was 5 days, we would update.
All right, there's the final one we'll take, and the person is Relentless on Facebook, concerning just from MPs who may be here in areas where those have been confirmed, particularly in eastern Jamaica, if persons in their area, and this one goes to Minister Vaz, if people are cooperating with the protocols in place.
I was very heartened today to see and hear from the police that all bars in Port Antonio were fully closed, and that if you needed to get a cue of white rum, you'd have to go to the supermarket. So that shows very clearly the seriousness in which people are taking it. And I myself drove around and saw it for myself. I think the regional team, as a result of the case that has been identified, is there doing their investigation, so I wouldn't want to preempt. But just to say that, just like the rest of Jamaica, I think more and more every day, the populace is realizing how serious this is and responding to it in a responsible way. So that's as far as I can say, but I'm definitely very, very heartened in relation to what I'm seeing on the ground.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Prime Minister. As a caveat, for those who have questions, Minister Tufton will have his digital town hall. Final one, though, from members of the diplomatic community, sir, who have also been asking questions on social media. What about us? Is the travel restrictions in place for diplomats, ministers?
Outgoing flights, outgoing passengers, people who are seeking to repatriate to their homelands, diplomats included. We are aware that some embassies and consulates have started to, and which is expected. It's a very trying time for the world. Very trying time for the world. But if we take the measures, we will get through this, and we will be even stronger as a nation for it.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, ministers, and thank you everyone for coming. Once again, Minister Tufton and Minister Johnson-Smith will host a digital town hall. You can pose all those questions that you had for us this evening on that social media town hall that will be held and will be starting very shortly online. Thank you, everyone. Please stay safe and have a good weekend.
Risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor or the nearest health center and share your travel history. The flu and coronavirus can kill. Let's protect each other. A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Reduce your risk of viral illnesses like the flu and coronavirus. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Cover your nose and mouth when coughing with a tissue and dispose of it. Avoid close contact with anyone with a cold or flu-like symptoms. If you become ill, please visit your doctor